Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last little while, and it's only been more recently that I've been able to review things a bit more regularly from them. I went for quite a while without reviewing anything from this brewery. So yeah, nice to see that they're getting beers out there a little bit more regularly now. I would say that historically speaking, I have been more impressed with their kind of malty beers, the Imperial Stouts. I had a really nice Doppelbock from these guys as well, but they have been putting a few IPAs and things out there recently, and it's one of those that we're going to have a look at today, and I've heard that this one is pretty good actually, so fingers crossed this does turn out to be a good beer like I've heard. So for this review then, we are going to head a little bit to the northeast of me here in Lund in Skåne, over to Karlshamn in Blekinge County, just next door, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Brygghus, and this is review number 7 or 8 from these guys, if I remember correctly. So yeah, Brewhouse 19, as you might call them in English. This particular beer is called the Cloudy Sunrise. It comes in at 6.8% ABV, and this one is a New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. And this one was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for February of 2021. And like I said earlier, I've heard that this one is pretty good. So the really notable beer from these guys would be the International Haze that they did, and I want to say that was with the Vale Brewing over in the States, if I remember rightly. But that's a lovely, lovely beer, particularly if you can get it fresh. But you know, historically, as I said, I've been more impressed with the malty beers that I've had from them. So the very first one that I had, the My Balalaika, that was either a big Imperial Porter or an Imperial Stout. Then I had their Doppelbock, which I thought was really nice. I think that one was called Festbock. And then the last beer that I reviewed from these guys was an Imperial Stout as well, and I thought that one was very nicely executed. But over the last wee while they've been expanding a little bit, and they've been getting more beers out there. So I look forward to seeing more of the beers that these guys have to offer over the next little while. But let's have a taste of this one and see how we get on. So yeah, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brygghus before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brygghus then, on to my brewery notes. So Brygghus, as I've mentioned to you before, are based in Karlshamn, over in the kind of southwestern part of Blekinge in southern Sweden, and apparently these guys were the first microbrewery in that county. But the brewery was founded back in 2012 by Dan Magnus Svensson, Magnus Carlsson and Mikael Lundell, and these guys worked together in the same company, and they homebrewed a little bit together. They entered a competition and they won it, and on the back of this they decided that they were going to set up their own microbrewery commercially as a result, and they've done fairly well out of it, I have to say. But apparently Karlshamn has one of the deepest ports in Sweden, and it's also had quite a long tradition of brewing. The old brewery there was built in 1883, and then the building was demolished in 1982. But this brewery is actually located in an old dairy building near the harbour. But the larger kit at the brewery has a 2,000 litre per brew capacity, and they've also got a smaller kit there for pilot brews and testing new recipes and things like that as well. But in recent times they've undergone quite a bit of kind of expansion actually. But over the course of 2019 they started issuing shares, and this allowed them to invest heavily in the infrastructure of the brewery. They brought on Ida Iverson, mixing that up, Ida Iverson as their new brewer, and they started buying up lots and lots of new equipment, and they went on to brew around 100,000 litres of beer that year, and they also purchased a distillery to expand and produce their own spirits and things. I think it's gin that they're starting off with, and I'm sure we'll see more things out of that over the next little while. But over the course of 2020 they were planning to expand the brewery further. I'm not sure if they did manage to do that because a little thing called COVID came along, but as of February 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 75 different kinds of beer, and they are putting out things a lot more regularly than they used to, of course. And I think it's a lot easier for breweries now because of the relaxation of the Systembolaget rules. They can now put their beers into the market, you know, once a month instead of once every 3 months and things like this. So yeah, we will be seeing a lot more beers from Brygghus Niton over the next little while, of course. But yeah, I saw this one on the list for February 2021, and I just kind of thought, I've not had a beer from these guys in a little while. Let's have a look at this one and see how it goes. And it's another IPA, but it is supposed to be pretty good actually. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brygghus Niton Brewhouse 19 for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have been doing. So yeah, let's get on and have a taste of this beer itself then. Quite curious to see what this has in store for us. So as you can see, you know, cloudy sunrise. This beer, 6.8% New England IPA. It says on the side here, hazy double dry hop New England IPA with Idaho 7 and El Dorado hops. Both of these are very nice actually. I've had a few encounters with, well, many I can encounter I should say, with both of these hops. Idaho 7 gives you a lot of really soft, juicy tropical fruit. El Dorado is a bit more of a kind of old school hop that gives you kind of passion fruit and a bit of softer mango and also a wee bit of pineapple from what I remember. El Dorado's been around quite a long time, but it's maybe just been a little bit underappreciated next to the likes of Simcoe and Galaxy and stuff like this, because it's got a fairly similar profile to both of those from what I remember. But yeah, the artwork on this can, I have to say, is very, very nice. And there you can see on the back, there is the Brygghus Niton symbol there. But yeah, 440ml can this. I actually can't remember what I would have paid for this, but I'm guessing it will either be 40 or 45 Swedish kroners. We'll go with the higher number as we always do. So about £4 sterling, 45 kroners, €4.50, and maybe about $5 American for this 440ml can. The one thing I'm going to say about this as well actually is that this actually feels pretty heavy compared to some of the other 440 cans that I've had recently. This beer, you know, it does actually feel quite dense and things. So yeah, it doesn't have oats listed, so maybe this is going to be a very wheat forward New England IPA, but 6.8% ABV. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, let's go for it then. See how we go. It does look very nice, I have to say. I think that'll do for the moment, and we'll get the rest of it out the can in a little bitty. There we go. So yeah, you can smell some of the lovely kind of tropical fruit notes of this beer already. But yeah, just look at this. You can see it's got quite an impressive head on it, although maybe in fairness I poured it a little bit aggressively. But if it is a wheat forward IPA, wheat always helps with kind of head retention and things like that in beer. Pardon me, it's not overly surprising, to be honest with you. So I would say there's about a finger, maybe about a finger and a half of a frothy. I would say slightly cream coloured head on this one. I don't think that is a perfect white head. I would say there's a little bit of a kind of cream tinge to it. But you can see it is a little bit bumpier near the surface, but overall it is really quite foamy. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall it goes together very, very nicely. But yeah, in terms of its colour, I would describe this one as, what would we say? It almost looks a little bit like, you know, mango and pineapple juice or something like that. It looks like a slightly mixed tropical fruit juice, this one. It's not quite as bright as, say, just straight up mango juice. It's not as pale as pineapple juice. It looks like it might be a kind of mixture of the two, to be honest with you. So yeah, I always like comparing these New England IPAs to different fruit juices, to be honest with you, because that's what the beers really just remind me of. But in terms of the haziness of the beer, I would say this one's actually got a fairly impressive level of opacity, a fairly impressive level of haze for its ABV. So remember, the colour of these beers is dependent on 1, the type of malts that you use, and 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour. But in the first instance, it's dependent on what on what malts you use. But the level of haze in these beers usually depends on the oat and wheat ratio. Theoretically speaking, as you go up the alcohol scale, your beer should get hazier, but it's not always the case. You know, New England IPAs can go in various different directions, but this one I would suggest is quite hazy because it seems to have a fairly substantial, according to the ingredients list, it's got a fairly substantial wheaty component to it. But yeah, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one then. I'm quite curious about this beer. So, yeah. Straight away with this one, you can smell that the beer is a little bit more wheaty, but on top of that, it's got a lovely, lovely juiciness to it. And I mean, Idaho 7 and El Dorado are both going to contribute to that. It's a very nice and very inviting beer, I have to say, just on the basis of the aroma. So I'm quite curious to see what this one has in store for us. I think it will be very, very nice. Yeah. So let's break this down then. So as I've said to you in previous reviews, I think New England IPAs can go in a few different directions. They can be oaty and creamy, they can be wheaty and bitey, they can be more barley malt leaning and kind of bready, they can be a little bit more farmhousey and yeasty, they can be kind of rye and they can be a little bit more rye leaning and a bit grainy, and you can also have the ones that are fairly kind of brown sugary, I guess we could say as well. So yeah, it's interesting, this one, because this beer, while it does have an interesting component to it, because it actually smells really soft and almost bready at the same time. So there is you do pick up a fair bit of the kind of barley malt out of this one. I would suggest that, just from experience, I would say this beer does come across as if it has a fairly substantial yeasty component in it, in my mind. But you've also got a nice little bit of kind of wheaty bitiness there. If you take the aroma of this beer in a little bit more deeply, you've got a good little bit of wheaty bitiness coming out of the beer. So yeah, I like how that goes together on this beer. But overall, it really comes across as quite a nice, soft and juicy beer, I would say. So yeah, the malt base, there's a bit of sweetness to it. As I would say, in the malt base, you get a bit more kind of. There is a wee bit. If I was blind smelling this, I might actually wonder if this had a little bit of lactose in it, because it almost has a wee touch of that kind of milkshakey type thing coming out of it as well. And I would guess that might be down to what yeast they're using, to be honest. Or it could just be down to the hops, because the yeast and the hops can do some really interesting things together. But yeah, there is a little bit of a wheaty bitiness to the beer. You do get a little bit of a kind of thicker yeasty quality in there as well. And there's some really nice, how would you say, there is a bit of nice kind of, there's a little bit of a softer kind of white bready sort of thing as well. This is a really interesting beer in terms of its aroma. So I like how this, I do like how this one goes about its business on the malty side of things. Very soft, slightly sweet, and then a little bit of a wheaty, kind of bitey and slightly yeasty aroma coming out of it. It's really quirky, that, I have to say. But I do remember having the same from some of the other IPAs, notably the International Haze from Brygghus Neaton. I do remember that. But yeah, I think that covers the malty side of things fairly well, I would say. There's not too much more to report on that. Soft bready notes, bit of yeastiness, a little bit of wheaty bitiness in there, and it almost just comes across as a little bit lactosey, to be honest with you. So yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, in the back of the nose you will get a little bit of earthiness out of the beer, but it's got a nice big green component to it as well. There's a really nice kind of floral aromaticity comes out of this one. There's a bit of a lighter kind of grassiness to the beer as well, which I really like. And yeah, it goes together. It does go together quite nicely in that sense, for sure. The green side of the beer for me, the most prominent component would be the big kind of floral character. Both of the hops in this, they're both American, and I think they both give you some. I think El Dorado's about 12% alpha acid, whereas Idaho 7's a bit higher, maybe 14 alpha acid or so. So when you've got big hops like that, it's not surprising that you get a good kind of green component out of the beer. It does smell like this, with this beer, it does smell that the majority hops will have been added as late additions. Remember, if you add the hops early on during your wort boil, that gives you more bitterness, and you've got a trade-off over the period of your wort boil where bitterness drops out in favour of flavour and aroma as you go later on. And this one's double dry hopped as well, that's the other thing. So you can pick up a little bit of that kind of green dustiness out of this beer. But yeah, Nice big kind of floral green component to the beer. It's a little bit, I wouldn't call it spicy, but it's quite a deep aromaticity that you get out of this one, but a nice sort of grassy component to the beer as well. It's just got a lovely depth to it, this one, on the green component as well. So yeah, that makes the beer, I think, lean a little bit more towards the wheaty side of things on the malty side, and I think those two elements kind of have a good antagonistic relationship together, but that works. But the fruity side of this beer is kind of as you would expect if you know these hops. So let's focus on that side of the beer then. So for me, you got a lovely little bit of kind of, there is a wee touch of a kind of more pungent passion fruit in this one. You've got some really juicy mangoes in there, and you've got a little bit of you know, a kind of softer apricot-y papaya type thing in there as well. I think, you know, El Dorado, I remember being a little bit more kind of straight up. I remember it being a little bit passion fruity, a little bit mango-y, and then a bit pineapple-y, whereas Idaho 7 I felt was a bit, it has a really soft flavour and aroma to it, and you get a good balance between the two. So the stronger passion fruity notes and the slightly more oily mango, I suspect, will be coming from the El Dorado in this one, but the little papaya apricot-y side of things, I would think that's coming from the Idaho 7, to be honest with you. So it's a really interesting combination, this, actually. I don't think I've ever come across this combination before, so I think this is, as I say, this I think will be a really nice, interesting beer. But you get a good little bit of pineapple out of this one. There's almost a wee touch of a kind of peachy sharpness to the beer as well, to be honest with you, and you've got a little bit of a kind of citrusy, zesty kind of quality too. So I really like how this one goes together. The aroma of this beer, I think, is, you know, really, really nicely done. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just reflect on the aroma a wee bit before you taste the beer, but I think it is time for us to taste this one now. So this one is the Cloudy Sunrise New England IPA, double dry hopped, coming in at 6.8% ABV from Brygghus in Karlshamn, over in the southwestern corner of Blekinge, here in the south of Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away, that is a very nicely done New England IPA. Yeah, that's pretty solid. That's a level up on the last couple of IPAs that I've had from these guys, definitely. Yeah, that is very nicely executed, actually. So thumbs up to Brygghus. I mean, what I would say to them, if you're going to go forward with the New England IPAs, use your base recipe that you have here. Use the principles that you've used with this beer, because that is pretty damn impressive, actually. I can see why people were telling me that this was a good one to try. So yeah, let's fire the rest of that into the glass. This is actually one of the last IPAs I'm reviewing as well, from my February 2021 lot. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame, actually, that I didn't review it a wee bit earlier, to be honest with you. But you know, that's probably the best IPA outside of the international haze that I've had from them so far. So well done to Brygghus for this. If they can produce more IPAs like this, they will get a good bit of recognition. So yeah, what I would say is, you know, play around with this style a bit more, you know, perfect it, and then release a few more, kind of, you know, release a couple of West Coasters, a black IPA or something like that. And you know, the malty beers from this brewery have always been good. But yeah, seems like a bright future ahead. It seems that Ida Everson knows what she's doing. So that's good. That's good. Good to see more female brewers as well, which is nice. But this is a solid New England IPA, absolutely. You know, what I would also say about this one is, a bit of a shame if it's only kind of released once, to be honest with you. So it would be nice to see them, you know, release it again. But then again, it might be considered an experiment. So if they can take the base recipe and play around with different hops or whatever, you know, they will have a solid future when it comes to these IPAs. But like I say, that's a really well executed beer. So where to start with this one then? let's try and break down the flavour of this. What I will say about it is that overall it strikes me as a nice floral IPA. It's got the soft juicy notes, and then it's got a wee bit of bitiness. I mean, it kind of, from the aroma, you can get an impression of what this beer is going to be like, and it delivers. You know, it delivers exactly what you would expect, but it's well executed. You know, it's well crafted, this. Yeah, really good. So yeah, straight away with this beer then, middle third of your palate, you can feel a nice kind of soft white bready quality that just blankets the middle of your tongue, and I really like that about this. So if you go to that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, there's a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing. It comes out of the beer. You do get a little bit of that. Then you can feel on the back third of your palate there's a slightly thicker wheaty quality there. You can actually feel the wheat. The malt base in this beer, of course, is quite wheat heavy. So in the middle third of your palate, you can feel there's a bit of a kind of softer white bready note from the barley malt, and then there's just a little bit of a kind of thicker wheaty layer kind of sitting on top of that. But then if you go onto the back third of your palate, the wheat has a little bit more bite, and you can just feel it kind of thickens up a wee bit. And the back third of your palate is definitely a wee bit kind of thicker and more bitey than it's definitely a little bit kind of thicker and more bitey than the middle third of your palate anyway. But yeah, it's quite a straight shooting malt base in a sense, but I think that works for the beer, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think yeah, it's you will notice in the middle third of your palate as well, it does develop a wee bit of kind of almost sweetness actually. So there might well be some sort of, you know, maybe a bit of Maris Otter or a bit of Golden Promise or something like that in this beer, because in the middle of your palate you can feel there's a little bit of a slightly Werther's Original kind of butter candy thing sort of develops there. And this, of course, will be the alcohol flavours, but there could well be something in there supporting that, you know, Cara Munich, Golden Promise, maybe a bit of Maris Otter or something like that, because you can feel just a little bit of a kind of brown sugary butter candy type thing coming out of this beer as well. So I really like how that goes together. The malt base in this beer, remarkably straight shooting, but it really works. It goes along with everything else that's in the beer. Impressed with this one, seriously impressed with this beer. On the hoppy side of things then, in the back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of the beer, but you know, not a lot. As you move further forward, it very quickly starts to develop a floral character, and then it becomes really quite aromatic as you reach the kind of front corners of the tongue there. I think I'm catching this beer at just a really nice level of maturation as well. It says it's best before the 1st of the 12th, 2021. So I'm wondering exactly when this beer has been canned, to be honest with you, if it's saying the 1st of December, because usually you would put like a year on the New England IPAs. You would usually give a kind of best by date within the year, so it's worth bearing that in mind. But yeah, it's I think I'm getting this one just at a really good age actually, so that's definitely worth saying, because you know, if you have these New England IPAs too early, I always find that New England IPAs, if you have them straight fresh, they always feel a little bit green, and you know, if you had, I think that works for the West Coasters, but I don't think it works quite as well for the New England. I think these need like 10 days, 2 weeks in the can to just kind of mellow out a little bit, and I think that's when you get the best out of the New England IPAs. They need just a little bit of time to mellow out, to be honest with you, otherwise you just get a lot of green out of them. But yeah, this beer does have a really nice kind of big floral aromatic component, and that builds a good bridge with the wheaty side of the malt base. So this is a bit more of a kind of bitey, wheaty and floral aromatic New England one. This, if you like the Trillium sort of IPAs, you will enjoy this one. I always found the Trillium beers to be a little bit more wheaty, to be honest with you. But round the front curve of the palate, it's definitely a little bit lighter and grassy, but there's a fair wee bit of zest in there as well. But the green component in this beer certainly works for it too. Let's focus on the fruity side of things then to round off the tasting part. And again, as I've repeated, if you know the hops in this one, then this beer really shows them off quite nicely. So if you go to that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a thicker kind of wheaty component there on that border region. Again, there's a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty type quality as well, which I do like. Then you can feel there's a bit of a kind of smoothness. There's a bit of a more kind of barley malt, soft white bready smoothness kind of underneath that as well. I don't think the wheat really comes out on the front third of your tongue, but then you get all these lovely tropical fruity notes. So if you go towards the back of the front third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a stronger passion fruit there, then that quickly becomes a softer mango, and then moving further forward, that's when you get those two components I mentioned, I think, are mainly from the El Dorado, but then as you move further forward, you get the soft Idaho 7 notes, you get the papayas, you get the apricots, you get things like that, and you can feel there's a bit of a, you can really feel there's a bit of pineapple sitting on top of those, on the front half of that front third of your tongue, which is quite interesting. There's maybe a little touch of a peachy sharpness there right in the middle of that front third of your tongue too. But yeah, it's a very soft, tropical, fruity kind of vibe that you get out of this beer. And again, I would just say that it's very well crafted and it's very well executed. So yeah, if Brygghus Niton can continue their New England IPAs in this light, they're going to do very well. I'll tell you that straight away. They are going to do very well with these. So yeah, I look forward to seeing if they can produce a few more beers like this over the course of 2021. This is my first review from them in 2021, but I'm impressed with this one, I have to say. So thumbs up to them for that. Definitely check this beer out if you get the chance, and I'll need to have a look and see what they're releasing in the next few months actually. But yeah, impressed with this one, seriously impressed with it. So well done to Brygghus Niton, as I've repeated. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, let's round off the review there. I described this beer, it's pretty much right in the middle, the spectrum. Mid-bodied beer, smooth carbonation. There's a wee bit of, as I say, there's a wee bit of kind of smoothness and kind of slickness to it as well. It's quite a smooth, I would say, describe it mainly as a kind of smooth New England IPA. But good little bit of hoppy bitterness. There's some really nice, I'd say overall it's just a smooth beer. There's a little bit of hoppy bitterness to this one, but I would say I don't think it's any more than your kind of standard 30 IBUs. The malt base is fairly smooth. It develops a little bit of sweetness later on, and then you've got some really nice, kind of soft tropical fruit notes and things like that out of this beer. So yeah, it's quite a soft tropical fruity beer, good bit of floral aromaticity to it, and then it's got a wee bit of wheaty bite, and it's quite a wheat orientated New England IPA for me. But solid stuff from Brygghus Niton, and I sincerely hope that they continue their New England IPAs in this vein. I look forward to trying like a West Coaster and a black IPA from these guys. It'd be cool to see some of those over the next little while. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one, it was the Cloudy Sunrise 6.8% New England IPA from Brygghus Niton. Very impressed with this beer, and I would recommend that you have a go with this if you get the chance. I feel that I should have reviewed this one a little bit earlier in the month, but what can you do? So fingers crossed for more beers like this from Brygghus Niton. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know your favourite beers are from Brygghus Niton. I do hope that I can go over there and visit these guys at some point. It'd be nice to get them on for a Meet the Brewery segment if these guys are the first kind of Blekinge brewery. Actually, that would be a really interesting thing to talk about on one of those segments. But yeah, really cool to encounter these guys, and this has been a seriously impressive IPA. I've always been more impressed with their malty beers, to be honest, but I think this one does maybe indicate an interesting future for them on the IPA front. So yeah, the Cloudy Sunrise New England IPA, 6.8% ABV from Brygghus Niton in Karlshamn in Blekinge here in the south of Sweden. Check out this beer if you get the chance. Have a look at some of the beers from the brewery, and if you get the International Haze, that is definitely worth trying. But thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Make sure you check out Brygghus Niton.